These paradoxes are pointing in a direction. The reason I raise this one here is that I have the sense, looking at your argument on free will, that it's pretty close to bulletproof. But its being pretty close to bulletproof is compelling if it's the only argument on the table and it's pretty close to bulletproof, and not compelling in the same way if there are arguments that are similarly compelling on the other side. In other words, I don't think that the argument as you lay it out is completely decisive. Now, that said, I would imagine that somebody who's explored the topic as you have hears that, and you think, oh no, I'm sitting across from another person who doesn't get the problem with free will. And you're not. I would say my battle on this topic with people has been to compel them of just what a small fraction of the public conception of free will one actually has. But the question, I think the thing that separates you and me, is you believe free will is actually a non-entity. And I believe it is a dim shadow of what people would like it to be and what many people think it is, but not non-existent. And that the fact of its being difficult to attain but not non-existent is actually a vital fact, one that's necessary, and one that's reflected actually in a lot of the things that people know about how you run your life.
Right. Well, so let me make a few distinctions, which I think will be useful, because it's easy to lose sight of what the actual territory here is. So to say that free will is an illusion or is nonsensical, or that we don't have it, is not to say that there's no such thing as freedom or autonomy or a difference between being coerced in one circumstance or free to do what you want in another. I mean, those we have to preserve those obvious differences in human life and our preferences there, and I share those preferences. And to not be in a prison camp in North Korea is a good thing, and what's bad about being forced to be there are all the obvious bad things about being deprived of freedom. And to have no governance over your day-to-day existence. So the problem with free will is that, let's look at the basic claim. There's the sense, the libertarian sense, what's called in philosophy, the libertarian sense of free will, which is, I would argue, people's default sense of it. This is a notion that the problem with it is that it really is impossible to map on to the physics of things, whatever they are. So my argument is that any statement of causality, whether you're talking about a deterministic universe where effects follow from causes ad infinitum, and these causes of necessity precede anyone's conscious intent. I mean, your conscious intent is something that is happening on the back of, in our case, neurophysiology and gene transcription, and on backward to the Big Bang. That isn't a basis for this notion of libertarian free will, but nor is any invocation of randomness into the picture. So however you add randomness, quantum or otherwise, to determinism, you don't get freedom, you just get, the rolling of dice, right? The freedom that people think they have is a kind of self-authorship, right? Where there's nothing at their back that is fundamentally mysterious to them, that is the actual effective cause of what they think and do and want and intend. They are the thinker and the doer and the wanter and the intender. And by they mean their conscious minds, right? They don't mean this oblivion at their back that they can't account for. They don't
mean the sum total of the stuff that goes on inside of their skin. They mean their conscious self.
I mean, there are people who pivot to that argument. It's the whole person. It's my unconscious mind in addition to my conscious mind. But no, the reason why free will seems like a durable problem for philosophy is that there's something that people feel they experience directly. They feel conscious intent as being the proximate cause of what they voluntarily do, and they feel that they are the true upstream cause. And one feature of that feeling, or one thing that it suggests, is the sense that if you could rewind the movie of a person's life, right, to a few seconds ago or a few minutes ago, or days or weeks or years, at any one of those choice points, they could have done otherwise, right? That it's meaningful to say to someone, you did X, but you should have done Y, right? And that given another opportunity, with the universe being in precisely the state that it was, they could have done Y, right? That they're not merely robots or some form of some concatenation of causes. They're not a string of neurophysiological dominoes that have been falling their whole life long. They are agents that really could have done otherwise. And there's no account of causality that makes that seem anything other than illusory. I mean, again, you have to add the caveat around randomness, because yes, randomness introduces the prospect that they could have done otherwise, but it's for reasons that they can't own, right? If I told you could have married a different person, that really was within the bounds of the causal properties of reality to happen, but it could have only happened if there had been someone rolling dice differently in your brain, right? If there had been a different degradation of a radioisotope or something, which would have led you to do something differently, and that's not the free will anyone thinks they have.
So let's take a couple things just off the table so we don't end up tripping over them.
Okay.
One, I don't think we can rule out at a formal level a totally deterministic universe, but I think at a practical level we can. I think it is actually completely inconsistent with any belief in Darwinism that what you have is a universe in which there was no opportunity for anything else to ever happen for its entirety from moment one. Then Darwinism is an illusion, and nothing, in fact, makes any sense, including this conversation. It's all some sort of odd theater, and maybe the thing that makes least sense of all is consciousness, that there should be an awareness taking place inside of a totally scripted entity makes no sense. So anyway, let's put it this way.
Well, let's bracket that, because I mean that I think is interesting to consider whether our notion of possibility is just a fantasy.
Right. And so, as I said, you can't rule it out completely. It could be that the whole thing, frankly, it could be that we exist inside a deterministic computer in which somebody had a purpose in getting us to have this conversation and feel some way within it. And, all sorts of things have to be left formally on the map. But I think at a practical level, A, there's no percentage in it. If this really is a totally deterministic universe, then it's hard to even know how to complete that sentence. The level of pointlessness of anything other than simply doing what you deterministically have no choice but to do is what it is, and so let's.
But even in that case, there still is there's a consequence to not knowing what's going to happen, and there is the reality that a parent choice still plays a role in deciding what in fact happens. Is that
a purely mechanistic one.
Yeah, but you can't just wait to see what happens, because that is itself a choice which begets certain consequences and closes the door to other consequences.
I have to say, inside of a completely deterministic universe, I don't even know what you're talking about. What do you mean consequence? It's so fully automatic.
Well, yes, but it is on some level we're at Zeno by another route, because
yes,
it's just a single object.
Right.
There's no such thing as events. There's no such thing as causality. It's just a block universe on some level.
Right.
The future exists as much as the past.
So actually, let's go back to Zeno, because I don't think we got the value out of it.
Okay.
In just setting the stage here for the discussion that I hope we'll have, the thing about Zeno's paradox is that actually Zeno's style logic is recovered by some models that are taken seriously in physics. In other words, a many worlds interpretation, for example, that posits essentially an indefinitely large number of universes that account for all of the possible trajectories. So, to the extent that, I drop an item and it hits one fiber of the carpet versus another fiber of the carpet, you get two universes spawned in order to account for everything that is downstream of that. That's, in some sense, an obvious nonsense explanation. Is it standing in for something that we can't phrase, maybe because limits of human cognition or language make it impossible to phrase? And so, the paradoxes of quantum mechanics, for example, it's possible that there's some way we could construct, let's say it's a language barrier. There's some way we could construct language that those things wouldn't sound so outlandish, but we don't have it, and so we're constantly offering them and then stuck with the disbelief that comes along. So anyway, my point would be, you've been to New York, and you know that there is a formal problem given a particular way of phrasing the process of getting to New York that you couldn't have been there. And what you're left with is the argument has a strength, and the empirical fact that the argument does not apparently prevent you from getting places also carries a weight. In fact, it carries the dominant weight. And those two things live together.
Right. Except I think the experiential, the experience that functions in this analogy as knowing that you've been to New York is, if there's a novel part to my argument against free will, it's this one, which is I'm claiming that no one actually has the experience of free will. You think you do.
Right. Oh, and I just, to take the straw man off the table, and I know you wouldn't intentionally straw man, but I do not believe that free will exists as people imagine it. That there is an illusion of free will that is very powerful, and to which I think your argument is primarily addressed. And the problem is that this obscures a different question, which is there something that would justify the belief in something that would rightly take the label of free will that is hidden by a straw man version of free will that we don't even need to worry about because you and I both know it doesn't exist?
Well, no, we do need to worry about it because it is the thing that people are afraid to lose.
Well, we don't have to worry about it because you and I are on the same team in that fight.
Right.
And the point is, by the way, you are so haunted by mechanisms that you had no hand in creating that hold sway over every important decision that you're making, that your sense, it is clear that your sense that you are free moment to moment to choose as you would, that sense is an illusion. But my argument, what I'm trying to put on the table, is that there is something to free will. It's a small target, but that target, and the most important thing about it, if it were just simply that there was some sort of an exception to your argument, this wouldn't be a very interesting conversation. But I think once you spot the exception, if that's what it is, that the desire to enlarge it is overwhelming. And in fact, the irony of Sam Harris is that many of the things that occupy your time and your thinking appear to be attempts to take the wisp of free will that we are handed and to enlarge it and have it apply to a larger fraction of your life, which I think is a completely rational response to the discovery of just what a rarefied commodity free will is.
Right. Yeah, well, so this could be a semantic difference between us, but let's talk about what you think that scintilla of freedom actually is.
Okay. So first of all, it is utterly dependent on us not living in a deterministic universe. If we live in a deterministic universe, then I don't understand a damn thing, and it's game over for Bret. Assuming we don't, and I think the physics is pretty clear, there's no reason to think we do. There's quantum uncertainty, and the fact that there is quantum uncertainty means that uncertainty can exist at higher levels through various mechanisms.
Well, or we live in a universe where, if you take the many worlds picture seriously, which, again, is hard to do, but many physicists do at this point, we live in a world where everything that can happen does in fact happen somewhere, right? And you don't know which one of these worlds you're in, right? So it's a new kind of determinism in a way, which is every gradation of possible difference in this probability space, which is this conversation between us, is spawning yet another universe in which precisely that thing is happening, as deterministically as one billiard ball hitting another. But the uncertainty is we don't know which one. We don't know whether we're in the universe where we both start speaking Mandarin right now for reasons we can't understand, or we're in the universe. I'm pretty sure we're in the universe where we're going to stick with English. But whatever surprises are here are can still be understood deterministically in that picture.
Well, I've never regretted not speaking Mandarin more than I do right now, but